Hello, Taurus. Let's begin slowly. The way you like to move through change, not with a jolt, but with steady breath and rooted truth. Something ended recently, didn't it? Maybe not in a dramatic way. Maybe there was no big explosion. No last goodbye. Maybe it faded like a song at the end of a long night, soft. Unclear, but undeniable. And even now, days or weeks later, there's still a part of you checking to see if it's really gone. Or if you just imagine the distance. Because endings are complicated for you. You don't let go easily, not because you're weak, but because you love deeply, practically, fully. When you commit your energy to something, you build around it. You weave your routines through it. You make it feel like home. So when something falls apart, it doesn't just leave an emotional hole. It disrupts your rhythm. It disturbs your ground. And yet, here you are. Still standing. Still breathing. Still showing up. You thought it was over. But what if? Taurus. It was never meant to last. What if that chapter, be it a relationship, a version of yourself, a role you outgrew, was simply holding space until you were ready to receive something more aligned with who you're becoming? You didn't fail. You evolved. And sometimes, evolution begins in silence, in discomfort, in stillness that feels too quiet to be meaningful until the shift becomes undeniable. Because something has shifted, hasn't it? Not just around you, but inside you. You're no longer willing to shrink yourself to fit spaces that don't make room for your value. You're no longer willing to keep steady what no longer feeds your spirit. And that's a big deal. Taurus, you've spent a long time believing that stability means staying, even when it hurts. But now you're learning that real stability comes from within, from trusting yourself to let go when the energy changes. Even if you don't have the next step fully mapped out, it doesn't mean you're abandoning your values. It means you're honoring your soul. And yes, there's grief in that. There's confusion. There's the quiet ache of all the words left unsaid. All the effort that didn't land. All the comfort you had to walk away from because it stopped being true. But underneath all of that, something is blooming. Slowly, quietly, with roots deeper than you've ever known before. You may not have seen it at first. But this ending was also an invitation. To reset, to recenter, to realign with the version of yourself that doesn't need to carry what others can't hold. To reclaim the peace you kept postponing. To finally put your feet on a path that matches your worth, not your past. Not your fear. Not your conditioning, just your truth. You've been under deep spiritual construction, Taurus, and no one saw it. Did they? Because you don't tend to cry out loud or collapse in public. You keep going. You do the dishes. You show up for work. You smile when it's expected. But inside, something has been burning and reshaping. And now you're stepping out of that fire, not as someone broken, but as someone softened, someone clear, someone ready. What's beginning now is not flashy. It won't demand attention. It won't come with trumpets or flashing signs. It will arrive the way spring returns after a long winter, gently, persistently, with green shoots pushing through the soil of your heart. It will look like better boundaries, like longer silences that feel peaceful instead of lonely, like clear choice, like a no that used to feel guilty but now feels sacred. You're not who you were. And thank God for that. Because the old version of you, the one who kept giving long after the well ran dry, who stayed because it was easier than explaining your pain, who thought loyalty meant tolerating emotional hunger, that version needed to rest. And now, you've made space for someone else to take the lead, the version of you that loves without abandoning yourself. You thought it was over. But in truth, it was the start of your return. to softness that doesn't compromise your strength, to quiet that doesn't feel like exile, but sanctuary, to relationships that feel safe not because they never challenge you, but because they respect you enough to hold you through change. So no, Taurus, this is not the end. This is the sacred in-between. And what's coming next is not a repeat of the past. It's the reward for every silent step forward you've taken in the dark. Taurus, for most of your life, you've equated stability with predictability, with routines, with knowing where things stand and what tomorrow brings. You find comfort in the known, in the steady rhythm of what has worked before. But what you're learning now the hard way, perhaps, is that not all stability is good for the soul. Some of it is just stagnation, dressed up as safety. This time, what's aligning for you isn't about staying put. It's about staying honest. You've outgrown the idea that loyalty means endurance at all costs. You no longer need to hold up structures that are crumbling just to feel secure. In the past, you may have tolerated discomfort just to avoid disruption. You may have stayed too long in conversations that drained you, relationships that silenced you, or habits that made your life small just because they were familiar. But something deeper has started to whisper to you. A part of you is tired not physically, but spiritually from holding things together that should have been released. And now, Taurus, you're learning a new form of stability, one that's rooted not in routine, but in self-trust, one that doesn't come from clinging, but from listening, one that invites movement without chaos, and change without collapse. You're discovering that real stability isn't about locking everything into place. It's about creating space within yourself that remains steady. No matter what shifts around you, it's the kind that lets you say, I don't know what's next, but I know I won't abandon myself getting there. It's the strength of choosing peace over patterns, the wisdom of walking away, not in anger but in clarity, the quiet courage to begin again without blaming yourself for what didn't last. And this alignment, it's not loud. No one might even notice it at first. But you will. You'll notice when you stop seeking permission to rest. You'll notice when your body relaxes in environments that no longer trigger you. You'll notice when you stop calling it love when it only felt like tension relief. This is you stabilizing at a higher level not by doing more, but by holding less. And yes, that's new for you. For someone who often finds their worth in being dependable, useful, or strong. This season is calling you into a more subtle kind of power, the kind that doesn't rush to fix everything. The kind that knows what's yours to carry and what isn't. The kind that doesn't prove itself through performance, but simply is. You are not broken for craving calm. You are not boring for craving slowness. But the kind of calm you're after now isn't about control. It's about alignment. A peace that doesn't come from making everyone else comfortable, but from being deeply at home with your own truth, even when that truth shakes the foundations of your old life. So, if you're feeling less reactive lately, that's not indifference. It's healing. If you're withdrawing a bit, choosing stillness over constant noise, that's not disconnection, it's sacred recalibration. You're not disappearing. You're rooting. And from that inner root system, something entirely new is about to grow. You are becoming a new kind of stable. The kind that bends but doesn't break. The kind that feels soft on the outside, but unshakable at the core. The kind that isn't afraid to be seen because you no longer hide who you are to be accepted by those who never saw you in the first place. This is your alignment. Taurus, it doesn't look like your old stability, but it feels a lot more like home. Taurus, there's something no one really tells you about letting go. They talk about the courage it takes to walk away, the heartbreak, the fear, but rarely about the quiet, unexpected beauty that comes after, the kind of beauty that doesn't scream for attention, the kind that arrives like morning light through a half-open window, gentle, Undeniable. And absolutely yours. At first, it didn't feel like gain. Let's be honest. Letting go, for someone like you, felt unnatural. It went against everything in you that values consistency, loyalty, and the comfort of knowing where you stand. You weren't just walking away from a person or a place or a habit, you were walking away from a version of yourself that had gotten used to settling. And that's no small thing. But now that you've taken some space, maybe just emotionally, maybe physically, you're beginning to see the truth of what you released. And more importantly, what has quietly returned in its place. Your peace, your time, your clarity, your voice. You used to second-guess yourself constantly, wondering if you were being too sensitive, too much, too rigid. Now you know you were never too much. You were just around people who didn't know how to receive you. And that wasn't your fault. That wasn't your failure. That was a mismatch. And you finally had the self-respect to stop forcing alignment. And look at you now. You're not spinning in someone else's emotional chaos. You're not anxiously checking your phone, waiting for someone to meet you halfway. You're not contorting yourself into shapes that don't fit just to avoid being alone. You're breathing deeper. You're sleeping more soundly. You're saying no without needing to apologize. That's the rainbow. Taurus. It's not just symbolic, it's energetic. It's your nervous system finally calming down after years of running on high alert. It's your body remembering what safety feels like when it's not confused with routine. It's your heart starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, you didn't lose anything important. You just cleared space for what's real. You gained presence. You gained discernment. You gain time you no longer spend replaying old conversations or writing imaginary letters in your head. You gain the ability to choose, not react. Not tolerate. Not endure, but choose what stays in your life. And what doesn't. And maybe, Taurus, you gain something even more valuable. The quiet knowing that you are no longer chasing closure from people who can't even give you clarity. You no longer need someone to validate your decision. You feel it in your body now. What is right? What is true? What is no longer worth holding onto? You've learned that healing doesn't always come with a finish line. Sometimes it's just waking up one morning and realizing you feel lighter. This is your emotional springtime. Taurus, you're not rushing to plant anything new just yet. You're still stretching. Still testing the warmth in the air. But you can feel it, the ground is fertile again. You can trust it. You can begin again, not because you're desperate to fill the space, but because now you're whole enough to wait for what's real. And let's be clear, this didn't come easy. There were nights you almost caved. Moments when the silence felt unbearable. Moments when you questioned if maybe you were the problem, but you stayed. You breathed. You held your ground. Even when the ground felt shaky. And that's the kind of strength that doesn't get celebrated enough. But the universe noticed, and now it's responding. Not with noise, but with alignment. Not with drama, but with depth. Not with more tests, but with quiet rewards that meet you where you are. The rainbow after the collapse doesn't mean everything is perfect. It just means you made it. It means something inside you held on. Even as everything around you shifted, it means you didn't abandon yourself. Even when it would have been easier to fall back into old patterns. And now, Taurus, you're entering a new season 1, where what you lost no longer feels like absence, but liberation. One, where you're not asking what's gone, but what's finally possible now that you're free. And trust me, what's possible from here is so much bigger than what you had to let go. Taurus, even after you've let go, even after you've stopped waiting, there are names that still surface. Aren't there? Not every goodbye came with closure. Not every ending felt fair. Some just faded. Some were taken from you before you were ready. and some still linger not in your day-to-day life, but in the soft corners of your mind, where old memories live, like pressed flowers in a forgotten book. You open it by accident sometimes, a song, a scent, a street, and suddenly, they're there again. No one talks enough about what it means to love as deeply as you do to build something real in your heart, even when others weren't building it with you. Because when you bond, Taurus, it's not casual. It's cellular. You store people. You remember the little things. You hold space long after they've left. Not because you're stuck, but because your loyalty doesn't have an on-off switch. It's woven into who you are. But here's the truth. Taurus, just because they're gone, doesn't mean the story wasn't real. Just because it didn't end with clarity, doesn't mean you imagined it. And just because they never came back, doesn't mean they don't still think of you. In fact, manedo, they may not say it. They may never reach out. But your absence echoes, especially in people who once felt the warmth of your consistency and didn't know how to return it. Especially those who took your patience for granted. Especially the ones who didn't realize that your silence wasn't anger, it was the sound of your heart finally closing the door. They remember you, Taurus, not just the things you did, but the feeling of being known by someone who didn't flinch when they fell apart. They remember how you stayed, how you forgave, how you gave them space to be imperfect without asking them to pretend. And even if they couldn't match your depth back then, it doesn't mean they weren't changed by it. But here's where your power lives. Now you don't need that acknowledgement anymore. Your healing doesn't depend on their realization. Your peace isn't waiting on their apology. Your story has moved forward with or without their final chapter. Because the real closure was never about what they could give you. It was about what you chose to give yourself when you stopped rewriting your value based on how they treated you. When you finally stopped wondering what you could have done differently and started asking what your heart deserves going forward. Yes, some of them will circle back. Some already are. A message, a memory, a subtle shift in their energy that suddenly wonders what you're up to. But just because someone reappears doesn't mean they've evolved. And you, Taurus, are no longer available for people who only recognize your worth in hindsight. Still, it's okay to miss them, to think of them, to admit there were good moments tucked between the hard ones. Growth doesn't require you to erase what was real. It simply asks you to stop romanticizing what was painful. You're allowed to hold the memory and still walk away from the person. That's not being cold, it's being honest. And maybe the most tender truth of all is this. Some stories were never meant to have a second chapter. They were meant to wake you up, to show you what you don't want, to teach you how to stop shrinking, to prepare you for love that doesn't confuse you, for care that doesn't leave you guessing, for peace that doesn't feel like walking on eggshells. So if you've been wondering whether they still think of you, the answer is yes. But more importantly, Taurus, are you still thinking of the version of yourself that allowed what no longer fits? Or are you ready to write new stories? Ones where you're not waiting to be chosen because you already choose yourself. This is the moment where you let the old energy go, not with anger, not with regret, but with deep respect for who you were. And even deeper love for who you're becoming. Because the people who didn't choose you, they were never meant to hold the version of you that's rising now. And Taurus, you're not where they left you anymore. Taurus, this time, it's different. You can feel it not in the rush of a new beginning, but in the weight of what you finally set down. You're not pushing to start over. And you're not grasping for something to fill the silence. You're just here. Still. Present. More whole than you've been in a long while. And whether you've said it out loud or not, something inside you knows you're not going back. Not to the way you used to settle. Not to the roles you used to play just to keep the peace. Not to the version of you that tolerated the bare minimum and called it loyalty. There's been a shift, and no, it didn't come with fireworks. It didn't announce itself with dramatic changes or big declarations. It arrived quietly. In the way your no now feels firm instead of guilty. In the way you stopped explaining your worth. In how peaceful your solitude feels now that you're no longer waiting for someone to meet you halfway. This is the moment Taurus becomes the mountain, not just steady, but sovereign. You've spent a long time learning what stability is not. It's not staying just because you've invested too much to walk away. It's not calling it love when it costs you your voice. It's not routines that make you numb. Real stability lives in the nervous system, and your body is finally learning what safety feels like without tension, without pretending, without hypervigilance. This shift isn't a phase. It's a frequency. And the more you honor it, the more the world around you begins to rearrange itself. People who once took your energy for granted start to fall away not because you made a scene, but because your new vibration no longer makes room for anything unreciprocated. Conversations that used to drain you start to feel intolerable. You no longer apologize for needing space. You stop explaining yourself to people who never really listened in the first place. And maybe, just maybe, the thing that used to scare you the most, being alone, has turned into the very thing that saved you. Because in that space, you remembered what your voice sounds like without interruption. You remembered what you love when no one else is watching. You remembered how to anchor into yourself, not into someone else's version of you. So no. You're not going back. Not to who you were. Not to how things used to feel. Not to the illusion that being needed is the same as being loved. From this point on, you walk differently. Not faster. Not louder, but with clarity. And Taurus, you've earned that clarity. This is your time to build a new life, not as a reaction to what you've lost, but as a reflection of who you've become. No more forcing. No more fixing what didn't ask to be healed. No more proving yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. You are not meant to be everyone's comfort zone. You are meant to be your own sanctuary. And now, you're ready to be loved without shrinking, to be seen without adjusting your light, to be supported without sacrificing your softness. The shift is here. And it's not about what's next. It's about what's true. So move slowly if you need to. Rest often. Trust the new instincts. And most of all, believe this: what's ahead of you is not a test. It's not a trap. It's not more of the same. What's ahead is exactly what you cleared space for. You're not just surviving anymore. Taurus, you're returning to yourself.